Lecture again deals with photography, but we're going to carry last week a little bit farther. In other words, we talked about cameras and what to look for when taking good pictures, how to try and set up good pictures if you're setting them up. Today we're going to talk about, for the most part, what to do with them once you've got them. But first, let me give you a few facts here about group shots, which I didn't really get to before. And I'll just throw out about 10 or 11 points here for you, maybe even more than that, about group pictures and portraits, which you might or might not have read about in the house. First of all, set up as many verticals for variety as possible. In other words, vertical pictures. Take your groups and put them on the stairs or on the lawn. Have the photographer get up high and shoot down. A little variety, because as you know by now, as well as the advisors do, that the organization sections are very static, lack variety, especially in group pictures. And this is one way to alleviate that situation. Crop at the elbows and the front row. What you're trying to sell are faces. And so the more you can crop out of the picture and the bigger that you can enlarge the faces, the better off or the better able you're going to be able to sell your product. Just that simple. That's usually, this isn't a clear-cut hard rule, because I have been going through and preparing some little points here for you today. There is very little reference or source material on cropping or scaling, and there is no hard, fast, set rule about where to crop pictures or where to crop people. A lot of people will say at the elbows for the front row, and this is usually the general practice. Other people will say anywhere to joints for group pictures, strictly for group pictures. In other words, the knees, the waist, the elbows, this type of thing, if you're going to crop group pictures at all. And yet but that's only for group pictures, like I said before. For informals, don't crop at the joints. Because a lot of times if you do, you're cropping at the elbows, and what they're doing, the center of action of the picture is with their hands. And if you crop at the elbows, of course, you're going to crop out the action. And this is a pretty dull picture. Keep sizes in your group to 30 or 40. If you have a group of 100, 120, break it down into 3 pictures or 4 pictures, however you wish to do it. But break it down. And like I tried to point out before, if you get the faces too small, of course, and you can't see them, and if you enlarge or reduce them, they end up fuzzy. Remember that red curtains in the background photo black. In other words, they'll turn out black on the print. And so if you have a brunette, particularly in the background, and there is on the last row, and there is a red background, then her hair is going to blend in, and all you'll basically be able to see is the white of her face. So keep this in mind too. And you want to show her hair. At the same time, keep your background neutral. Something that will not clash with the picture or take the center of interest away from the people in the picture. It should be not a very light color, but sort of a medium shade, not black, not white, or not dark, or not light, but in between. And make sure that nothing sprouts out of heads. You've seen the pictures where in the background there's a tree or something, and it's coming out of this person's head. Or it turns out to be a telephone pole. You take it outside, and you got this picture with this thing coming out, or else maybe you can't see their one arm, and behind them is a potted plant, and it looks like they got a bush growing out here. This type of thing. Watch your backgrounds. Try to set up your pictures in a wedge shape. And that boils down to this. In other words, your back row should be a little bit longer than the next row. And the front row should really be the shortest. This is exaggerated, but the front row should be a little bit shorter. The reason for this is that when the photographer takes the picture, in the picture it'll appear straight. It's a photographic principle I don't want to get into. But with the larger group in the back, when the picture appears and when it's brought back to you, it'll be even. Whereas if you take them all straight, what's going to happen is you get this type of thing, a distortion where they go like so in the background. You know, these pictures, when you take them on the bleachers and stuff, you know how it looks. The picture goes up and the faces get smaller as you go up. You want to keep away from this as much as possible. Keep the clothes and everything in the first row. Keep all the contrast down. In other words, put all the bright things and everything that's going to be real light. Put it in the back row because it draws too much attention to that center row. See? And for very large groups, try and set it up. For instance, like the band. Now, you can't make the band in 3 sections unless you divide it up into the different sections. So once in a while, a book will do that, and I'll record it together. All the bassoons, all the drums, all the tubas, whatever it is. Otherwise, make it a large group shot and try to set it up so that you can split it and put it on the gutter. Not on the gutter, but run it across the gutter. Once in a while, let's let it go right into the layout too. So basically, those are some tech ways to handle. Those are some ways to handle group shots. Of course, the other method is to eliminate groups altogether. I'll just pass this out. There's sort of not a growing trend, but there is a trend. Maybe you can't even call it a trend. To eliminate group shots altogether. Some schools put them in the back in a sort of a reference section altogether and just list them and just have the pictures. And then they try to fill up the activity section with informals and activity shots. Or else eliminate them altogether. I don't know whether you have ever seen the flight yearbook from Yearbook, Michigan. That yearbook eliminates groups altogether, and they use activity pictures and a look and life type layout. In this way, they get the variety and they set the style with the rest of the book. So this is something else you might want to consider. And for pictures, for senior portraits, make sure that you don't have any diagonal type poses, like this type of thing. This one gets me. She's got her back to you, and how she squinches around and gets this type of thing, and I'll never know. But the reason we say this is because it's not natural. Nobody walks around like this. If they do, they're going to do it for the rest of their life, because once they're So it's not natural. Try to keep them straight the way you would naturally see people walking down the hall. And the one other point is the eyebrow. The distance from the eyebrow to the chin should be the same, or should be consistent in all your pictures. In other words, from your eyebrow to your chin, they should always be the same distance on all of them. You can just be able to flip through the section, and that distance between pictures should be the same all the time. Now, so that finishes the group shots and stuff like that. Once you have the pictures, of course, then we turn and we start considering something different. And make sure that you have the following, not the following, but you have the type of prints you have, or the type that you're going to want to work with. In other words, be sure that they're sharp. Basically, be sure that all the pictures are sharp and that they're on glossy paper, and probably 8 by 10. Now, some yearbook manufacturers will recommend 5 by 7. But most of the time, make your pictures 8 by 10 that you send in, because it's always better to reduce than it is to enlarge. And so you're going to get a better focus or better clarity of picture if you reduce it rather than enlarge it. And if you send them in 8 by 10, most of them will be reduced anyway. Make sure that you have a full range of tones. In other words, you have a very definite, clear white, and that you have a gray, and that you have a black. And there are differences. I mean, you can get a gray black or a light black. Because when the yearbook company or your manufacturer makes halftones, he can do a better job if he has a definite range of tones in your picture. And he can read the dots, so to speak, a little bit better. And make sure that that definite range, or the range of tones, is in the is in the subject area. That picture, that part of the picture which you have cropped. And you make sure that you have all important detail in your highlight areas. In other words, that part of the picture which you're going to use. Make sure all the detail is there. Check for dust specks. And those little like wavy lines that go across the picture. That's dust too. It's a larger piece of dust. It's this type of thing. You see it's white on the picture because it's reversed really. But you see this type of thing across it, across the nose or something, or you'll have an eye and there'll be a thing across the eye. This is the type of thing, and this is very distracting. This is also dust. Or the little specks. So check and make sure you don't have these particular things on the picture. Also, if your student photographers do most of your pictures or your informals, make sure there aren't any ferrule-type scratches. Ferrule-type plates there are basically two types of picture drives: the round drum type, which you might have, and then the flat one where you roll the pictures on two flat pieces of metal and put them in this sort of shaped thing like this, and you plug it in and heats it and puts the gloss on it and dries the picture. Well, sometimes these plates get scratched, and it's very easy. We used to go through it takes 2 plates for this little dryer, and we used to go through 2 plates a year if we were lucky. Because, photographers, they pick it up and they drop it, and when they drop it, it hits something, and it gets a scratch up on the plate, and then when you put the print down, of course, and you roll it over with the roller, it removes all the water before you start to dry it, but at the same time, you're taking this scratch and putting it, you're not allowing any emulsion to settle there, and it leaves sort of a scratch on the print, and this comes out in the process when they make your book. So you want to watch for that, and check your plates too, particularly if you've had that thing for long. Check with your photographer and see what he says, and check the plates, and if you need new ones, go ahead and get them. They're a little bit expensive. They probably run about $9 a piece. But $18 is worth it if you're going to get consistently good pictures. So this is one thing you want to take into consideration. And then finally, remember that your picture will never reproduce better than your original. In other words, a picture in a yearbook will never be better than the original. And it's necessary for you to watch these things, and if it's not the way you like it, then have it done over, whether it's student or professional. And just because it is professional doesn't make him perfect. This is your one shot, your last chance. Particularly if you're a senior, you're producing the yearbook. You won't get another chance. So make sure that everything is as close to perfect as possible. Particularly pictures, because this is the largest. This is basically what the book is all about. And this is what the book contains the most of, pictures. All right, then after you have watched for these particular things, there are a couple things about picture care which you should be aware of. Remember, first of all, that photos are fragile. Photos are fragile. And you just don't roll them up and throw them around a room like airplanes and expect to have something. If you crease it, it has to be remade over somehow. If you fold it or bend it or you get it caught in your notebook, it has to be redone over because the crease will be reproduced. And there's nothing better than a crease across somebody's midsection in a group shot. It's ridiculous. Don't write on the back unless it's absolutely necessary, and if you do, make it with a grease pencil or else very lightly, because the impression comes out on the front of the print, and this can be reproduced in your yearbook. Don't put paper clips on. Keep your indents separate from the pictures, because the paper clips have a tendency to make impressions on pictures. And if they get a little wet, they'll rust. And of course, never roll a photo. In other words, don't take it and roll it up. Put a rubber band around it and stack them in a pile. This is even more ridiculous because they'll assume that shape after a while because you're dealing with paper, and then when you try to unfold it, the emulsion will crack. You might be able to fold it when you first get the print, but after it settles and hardens a little more, or the air cools it a little bit, and you unfold it, you'll crack the emulsion. That print's got to be redone again. Keep your fingerprints off. Work to the outside. You're going to be working on that particular print. This is important too if you are doing any work in the darkroom and you're working with negatives. Make sure that you handle the roll, the outside of the edge, or the outside edges of the roll. Because I, myself, have had instances where maybe I'm getting ready to, I'd be working in the dark, and all of a sudden I just could feel a roll of film starting to drop, and I'd grab it and save it from hitting the floor, but I'd grab it too hard. And then when I went to make a print, there'd be a thumbprint like right over the girl's face. I mean, this happens. This is very possible. Most of you probably have yearbook manufacturers that want you to stamp pictures on the back. If you do, then go ahead and do it. And write lightly, of course, the page and the picture number, and probably your job numbers on the stamp. But at the same time, don't stack them up immediately. In other words, don't take a whole bunch of pictures and just automatically stamp them and keep piling on top of each other, because the wet gets on the emulsion also, and this won't come off, period. So keep them separated and keep them individually out until that ink on the back dries. I think most of you are aware of this. One trick that we always try to do is we keep all our pictures for a section in an envelope file. And basically it boils down to taking an 8x10 manila envelope and lifting the flap and sealing it. This type of thing. And then we take a pair of scissors and we cut up sort of a half moon, and we have a sort of a little compartment or a little file for that particular picture, for that particular sections of pictures. You just label these activities, sports, whatever you want to do. Keep them stacked in a file. That's one way to do it. Okay, so that takes care of what to look for, picture care. And now let me define a couple terms for you. There are two basic terms: cropping and scaling. And this is a term which these two terms are actually different, but everybody makes them synonymous. In other words, they use cropping as a general term for both cropping and scaling. Whereas cropping is the idea of editing a picture. In other words, cutting out those parts that you do not want. But scaling is the process of enlarging or reducing, using the diagonal method, which I'll get into just a little bit. Now, basically, there are four or five reasons for cropping, which we'll deal with first. The first one is that you'll want to crop probably to emphasize the photographer's idea that he is trying to express. Is that clear? Now, you'll do some of this in the opening section, because a lot of times you'll just say, well, here's a theme, here's about 100 rolls of film, go crazy, man. And so he'll try and go out and express what that theme does to him. And so this is one time when you want to use cropping, when you can get across what he's trying to express, if you have those type of photographers. The second reason is because we want to eliminate unwanted portions of the picture. Cut out those areas which we don't need. 3, we'd want to compensate for technical errors. And this opens up a whole field, really, because those pictures which aren't technically correct, or which in which somebody, the photographer, botched, say maybe he exposed a half a roll of film or something. I got an example here I'll show you. But maybe on another half there is a good picture. For instance, maybe half the negative is exposed, the other half isn't, or maybe somehow he botched it up and half it's light and the other half is dark. But you do have a picture in that negative that you want, where you can take it and enlarge it, crop it, whatever you want to do with it, and crop out the part that isn't any good and just use the part that is good. This type of thing. 4, you might want to adjust your composition to fit the layout, the composition of the picture. In other words, maybe you have a definite space in the book that's horizontal, and they give you a vertical picture. You might want to crop, and yet you think that you could possibly get a horizontal subject out of the picture, or a horizontal subject of the picture out. And by cropping, you can do this and have it blown up into the horizontal picture that you want. You might want to alter back and foreground proportions. In other words, maybe you have you want to get a perspective shot where you see a lot of foreground, or maybe you want a background where you have a particular background which ties in well with your picture. This type of thing, you can crop this in or crop it out. And then you might want to shift your horizon line for emphasis. So there are basically some reasons about why we crop. All right, once we have this, then how do we crop? Like I said, cropping is editing, or locating center of interest. It boils down to that. Locating a center of interest, cropping. And there are 2 methods. There might even be more, but 2 of which I am familiar with. First of all, you can crop in the enlarger. Your photographer can crop in the enlarger. And he does this, of course, by extending the negative image on the easel. And the easel is a little metal thing which usually has a sort of a door type arrangement with squares cut out. 3 on one side and a whole big one on the other side, if you have that size. It's an 8x10 easel. And you slip in a piece of paper and put this under the enlarger and turn the light on the enlarger with the negative in between. The light shines through the negative and makes an image on this easel. Now, of course, if you put the paper in before you crop it, so to speak, then you're going to expose the paper and you won't get what you want. So you just use the easel as a guide. And the easel is usually white and you can see the image off the negative. And you can crop your picture by moving your enlarger up and down and letting it either extend off the side or else bringing it up farther so that it doesn't extend off the side. And if you have a group shot and you have something on the side, that you don't want, well then by just enlarging, or taking up the enlarger, bringing it down. Just like bringing it down, you can remove all its excess so that it won't be on the print by letting it run off the enlarger. At the same time, if he knows what type of picture you have, or what type of picture shape you want, he can make that picture shape for you with the enlarger. In other words, if you have a vertical space, he can take actually a horizontal type negative with things running across and locate the center of interest in that picture and enlarge it to such a point that he can make a vertical for you so that you'll have something to work with and you can fit it more easily into that space instead of having to crop it. So you want to be aware of this. And then, of course, the other one is the hand method. And it boils down to this thing, taking the 2 L shapes. You probably are familiar with this. And working them together, like so on a picture, and giving you an idea of what you can crop out and where is your center of interest. This will help you to see it a little bit better. So all it is just 2 L's. And you should remember that you want to locate your center of interest in that picture. by using the L's. You want to eliminate any distracting details. You want to eliminate excessive foregrounds and backgrounds. In other words, just plain crop it tight around the center of interest. And you can do this by using those little L's. Here are some examples I hope you can see. You probably can't. Yeah? I don't know whether you went through these. Probably most of you did go through these. But in each of these, there's a little picture down here in the corner which shows the original print. And Kodak took them and then cropped them the way they wanted to for effect. To illustrate, you notice that just how you would crop pictures like this. And here, you can't see it, but this picture was actually the center of interest was actually a lot smaller on the picture. The photographer had made the print and had quite a bit of foreground and quite a bit of background. And so when they cropped the picture, they cut out the foreground, most of the foreground and part of the background, and made the center of interest larger. And at the same time, they put you almost in the picture. It makes it even more effective because it seems like you're just right there seeing that play come off or seeing this play come right off the page. This one here, I don't know whether you've noticed this one before, but there are 3 people in this large size print, of course. I think you can see that. But basically, before this was cropped, there were 4 people. There was a girl here off on the side, and you couldn't see her because there were books piled in front of her, and her head was down like this with her hand in front of her, and all you could see, the angle was from this way. And so you got this type of thing, and you could just see the hand, the books, and part of her face. But they took it and cropped her out because she wasn't important. She wouldn't add anything to the center of interest. And you got this picture, which does have interest because you can see, and it contains all the principles of good available light photography. Faces are big, it's tight, and you can see the faces, light is on. In other words, the heads are large, but you can see the faces are clear. Here's sort of a perspective type thing. There was a tremendous foreground and background in this, in the original print. But what they did, of course, was to crop the foreground and background out because it was of no interest. And by doing that, they isolated the stair pattern, which gave this picture really fat. And you get sort of a 3-dimensional type thing. It's really a space study. This action shot of the tennis player was actually on the left-hand side of the negative. The other side was black. They cropped it out and isolated it. The center of interest, of course, and they blew it up, or they enlarged it, and they got a good picture on it. This picture, before it was cropped, had the whole cake on the table. And of course, the center of interest is a little girl, and so with effective cropping, they made the picture even more effective by enlarging her face and the action, in other words, her blowing out the candle. I mean, it wasn't necessary to see how many candles was on the cake to find out how old she was. I mean, this wasn't the point. This isn't the interesting point. This is what you'll see in most snapshots. Oh, I can tell how old she is. Look, if there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that type of thing. That's not the interest. The interest is the little girl trying to blow out the candles. See? Here's a good silhouette shot. Again, the effect comes from the fact that it is a vertical. Actually, it was a square picture. And most of the left and right sides were nothing but black areas. And so he centers the interest and crops out the sides, which are really excess. I enjoy this picture because I'm not a surf bug, but I enjoy either a lake or an ocean most of the time. Probably this you do too. Just look at this picture, it's refreshing. But it has more emphasis by the fact that it is a vertical. He has made use of that long line of the surf breaking, or the waves rolling in and breaking, with the fellow in our picture. This was actually a picture a lot larger, and on this side was nothing but plain everyday old lake. And he cut it out, and it makes it look like the lake is really ripping it up. The big wind blowing. But he made beautiful effect just by the different shape of the picture, and by containing or keeping that natural line in. This natural line, in other words, made by nature. Here's a thing, some information about cropping. Here's a picture I was telling you about of a cheerleader. I don't know if you can see here to the side, but that was the negative exposed. And you can only see her, really. There are actually two cheerleaders in the picture, but half of it is overexposed. Or underexposed. No, I just talk about it. See, and then they cropped out the part that wasn't important. And this is where you crop out any technical errors. And here's another picture which is of interest. Not only because of the fact that the two little kids, but the shape. This pillar type arrangement that we have. And it adds a majesty to the whole picture, because Lincoln, overshadowed the two little kids looking at the monument. But again, this was another crop picture, and there were 2 or 3 pillars in the picture, and we cropped it just to include that which was important. Cropped out all the excess pillars. Maximum of effect just by cropping. One other picture is this one. If I do anything, I'll have one good idea for you to take back. This is a beauty. I told this to my kids in sections the other day. But here's a picture of 2 football players sitting at halftime in the locker room. I don't know if you can see it way back there. And there on the other side is a hand outstretched, appealing to these fellas. And this picture, in its originality, had the coach in the picture. But Lloyd, the fellow, you are playing with this now, but Lloyd took this picture and cropped out the coach and just put the hand to really give it a dramatic effect. Now here he uses it as divider. Now, one of the reasons for this book is not to copy necessarily the same pictures he uses, but take that same technique and adapt it somewhere else. And so my idea is this. How about a baton or a band director holding a baton in front of a band doing the same thing? Or a choir director. You know how they get it. This type of thing, right there, you got 2 hands, just cut them right off, you got it. The perfect picture. That technique, just readapt it to your particular situation. All right, once we have cropped the picture or taken the areas which we think are important, how do we scale? There are a couple of 3 or 4 ways, and I'm not going to go into much detail, because I think that your section leaders will do this for you at some time between now and Friday. But there are a couple of 3 ways to do it. One is by a formula, a little algebraic expression. You want to figure, if you have a picture and you've cropped it out, you want to try and enlarge it or reduce it to a size that you have already on your layout sheet. Take the picture, you've cropped it, now you want to scale it. What do? To figure out what size that picture will make on your layout. There are, like I said, a couple of ways. One is the algebraic formula, which goes like this. O width and O depth. This is basically the formula for it. And if we take that, of course, we'll take a 5 by 7 picture. 7 being the width, 5 being the depth. Would you agree with that? All right, the old width is 7, the old depth is 5. Put your equal sign in, and you want to make it 4 inches wide, for instance. Put your 4 on. You want to figure out how deep it's going to go. Make it an X. Follow through 7x is 20. Very simple proportional expression. And you get 2 and 6/7. 2 and 6/7. How would that break down in the Piker rule? Anybody know offhand? That's your problem for electrically. Figure out how that breaks down. It'll be about 2 and 6/7, or about 3 inches. So this is basically an easy way to do it by using the algebraic expression, but there are a couple of simpler ways. This type of thing, a proportion scale, you've seen this. Goes round and where she stops, only you know that type of thing. The inside scale is for the original size, the outside scale is for your reproduction size. And basically, by taking the original size and finding the height, or using the height and depth, and then putting it at corresponding places on the scale, you can figure out what either your height or depth will be. You've seen this type of thing, the slide rule. Here are 2 different types. I don't know how to use these, so don't ask me if you see me walking around. But there they are, 2 proportion type things. I'm absolutely stupid when it comes to math. And I'll be the first to tell you. The newest, probably one of the newest ways is this way, with the grid type scale. See, the grid lines are used as crop marks, or as cropping aids. And then this little thing here that sticks out, please don't break this off because then you're finished, with a little red line on it is a diagonal. I think you're acquainted with that. I'll do that again. It's a diagonal across which you put in your corner, see. There is also a new thing called a scalograph, which is basically 2 L's that are shaped like so. And on the corners of these 2 L's, there is a knob that tightens and loosens. And in between here is a rod. And you loosen these 2 knobs, take this however you want to do it, and then fasten it down. And then the rod will only let you go in one direction, and that's diagonally. And so you'll move either one way or the other, and you'll get the direct proportion. This thing costs about $12 or $10, and probably most of your yearbook companies have it. It's expensive, but it eliminates a lot of problems. Another method is, again, not only the expression type thing, but by taking drawing a picture and figuring it out. For instance, say you have a picture that you want to crop out. This is a self-portrait. There's something funny about it. All right. Now say you have this picture and you want to isolate this particular subject on the picture. Take a grease pencil, and here's where the cropping comes in. You might want to use these little L's. Like so. Say, for instance, you want to isolate this. All right, to do so by moving this back and forth. This illustrates the technique. And you will have, well, the isolated. You probably want this one. Okay, there we go. An extra 3 inches there for the knots. Now, you might want to isolate this, and with a grease pencil, mark on the white area of the picture, not on the picture, but on the white rim outside of the picture, because most of them come to you that way. Put your crop mark, in other words, where you want to have this picture cut. I'll use this thing. And then draw you can either leave the crop marks like that, or you can draw your lines on the back. Now we do it that way because we want to make it as And we do it lightly, by the way, with a grease pencil. This kind of thing. Because we want the printer to know exactly where the crop marks are at. Now, if you don't do it this way, then take this picture size and put it on a piece of paper. On a blank sheet of paper, take the size. This is 3 inches here, and this is 5 inches here. And then draw a diagonal from one corner to the other. Straight. This won't be too straight. Like so. Now, if you want to reduce it, you've gone far enough. But if you want to enlarge it, very farther. And if you want to go to, say, 4 inches wide, then take your ruler and measure from this point here, this extended line here, measure until the 4 inches bisects the diagonal. And then by dropping a perpendicular, so to speak, the geometric thing goes, then you just measure down until this point intersects, and that'll give you the distance. Okay? That's basically the technique. And like I said, if you want to go back the other way now, if you want to reduce it, and you want to picture 2.5 inches wide, then measure a point from here, so it intersects here at 2.5 inches. Make sure that this area here is 2.5 inches wide, and then again drop either the perpendicular or else measure down to that point and dissect that area right there. That'll be your distance down, and that's the method by just taking it on a piece of paper. That gets to be tedious too. And of course, that's basically how this is what this is based on. Of course, you don't do any cropping, you just use the grid pattern here. Each of these, any pattern or any combination of these lines in a square can be a crop picture. What do I have? All right, I'm going to run over a little bit, so just stay where you're at. Now remember that basically a picture is a communication, and its function is to convey information. But it is also bait. It is also bait, and the trap is body copy. So this is why we try to create as many interesting pictures as possible to bring the reader into the copy. Just a few points about captions I want to give you before we leave. Number one, set your captions in distinguishing type. You can or you can't. This might be one method, one way of doing this. In other words, to set off your captions. 2, accent with all caps, boldface, or other contrasting types. In other words, accent your caption with either all caps, boldface, or other contrasting type, like italic. And that is the first 2 or 3 words of the caption. That's how you accent. Take the first 2 or 3 words, or a meaningful set of words. Don't go over 3 or 4, friends, and then it gets too long. But like officers, that type of thing, or stirring heartily in home economic class, etc., etc. Stirring heartily, taking this little 1 or 2 words and isolating it and accenting it. Be consistent on page positions, line lengths, and number of lines. Now, most of you covered this in layout. But there are many ways that you can bring 3 columns. You might want a 1-column caption for all your 1-column pictures. You can either put a 2-column caption for your 2-column pictures, or else 2 1-column captions. Your 3 columns, you can either put an entire 3-column caption, or a column and a half, or else 3 1-columns. This would be a little jumbled up with 3 1-columns, but if that's your style and you want to do it, then go ahead and do it. But remain consistent. So pick a method. Whichever way you select, and stick with it all the way through. And if you don't have captions underneath pictures, then figure out a style for those that go on the side. Maybe you want to make them all one column. But be consistent. 4, plan your caption spaces and edit. In other words, if you only leave a 1/4 of an inch of one column, it boils down to maybe, if you're in a 3-column book, it'll boil down to about 6 lines of 37 pipas wide. All right, that's an inch. A 1/4 of an inch would be a 1/4 of 6, which would be maybe 1.5 or 2 lines. 37. This is what we mean. 5, don't use space for facts that could go into copy. Don't use your caption space for facts that could go into the copy. And I'll agree with this only to a point. Sports. A lot of times you can't get in. It isn't a good practice to highlight the whole season in sports copy. Now, it is a good practice to highlight, but I mean to cover the whole season in sports copy. In other words, have a description of every game. But yet, through picture captions, you can explain more than what you have in the copy. 6, don't combine your captions with identifications. And identifications are the names underneath the group pictures and stuff. Captions describe the action in the picture. Identifications are those names that identify people in a group shot. But don't combine them because it causes confusion. 7, be meaningful. Don't resort to a meaningless gag of no significance to the reader. In other words, maybe you have a friend and they took a picture of her making some goofy expression, and you know what it was all about, and boys say, well, I'm going to click this one, and you put down a caption, this is really funny, good, it's going to about 3 people. But you're selling a book that is going to be read by many people, so make everything meaningful. 8, avoid poor, questionable taste. You know, like, here is Gene, he is a rat fink. That's poor taste. Or slang, avoid slang. And don'ts. Don'ts. That's a good term, don'ts. How do you avoid that? Action verbs. The best way to explain it. To be short and concise. Use good action verbs.